So I am Daniel McCarthy, Vice President of Emerging Technologies with Strategic Education Incorporated. And SEI is a holding company for a couple of universities and alternative learning functions. We are responsible for Capella University, Strayer University. And within both of those, we've created virtual assistants or bots that provide service and support to our student base. And I'm here today, and thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to talk about Google's Dialogflow. And I'll start with a deck as quick as I can, and then drill down into a demo. So at SEI, we have deployed, as I said, 2 bots into production. And one of those bots, Irving, on our Strayer property, has had well over 1 million conversations with more than 80% satisfaction rate. It's pretty telling how satisfied users are. We're constantly chasing the long tail of what our student base is interested in, but the power of conversation really comes through and gives us an idea of what our students' active intent is. So we'll go into with what the anatomy of a bot is, and then we'll drill down into each one of these before we jump into a demo. When you think of conversation, it's really the most natural interface. But when you think about it in terms of computing, it's not that easy to dissect. And that's where the natural language understanding platform of Dialogflow comes into play. We started working with it back in 2017 when it was still API.ai. And while a number of things have changed over the years, the core, the anatomy of a bot, really maintains the same. And we can do that in the terms of entities and intents and responses, and a little bit on the fulfillment side. And entities you can really think of as nouns, but throw in there, in addition to person, place, things, also throw in there ideas or coded values. As developers, I'm sure you guys are used to working with coded values, but users aren't, and they shouldn't be subjected to our nomenclature, our jargon. Entities can come in and play a role there. Intents are really the core of it within Dialogflow. They are where you will define the training data for your intent, the response associated with whatever the user's active intent is, and you can also define parameters and whether or not you're going to use fulfillment. And on the fulfillment side, that's where you can programmatically orchestrate or fulfill conversational tasks, perform actions on the user's behalf. When we started at SEI, we were very opinionated that we weren't going to create an FAQ bot. We had seen some FAQ bots out there, worked with voice assist, wrote questions, but they weren't personalized at a level that we wanted. At SEI, we perform actions for our users. We look up information from their accounts, and we provide that back to them in as personalized a manner as we can. For example, students at Strayer can register for classes with a virtual assistant. Not only does the virtual assistant execute the act of registering, it'll also make recommendations for what classes the student should take next, make projections on when they can graduate, and give them more information on outstanding program requirements. That personalization really is the key to it. But digging into entities are going to help you with your language model, the memory of the bot, and the storage of variables. And I'm going to speed things up a little bit, so stop me, Jeff, if I'm going too fast. I definitely want to get into the demo. As we talked about, entities are essentially nouns and or that you want to be able to pull from the user or to use to drive the conversation forward. Intents are comprised of training phrases, annotation, and parameters. Training phrases are the examples that you want the language model built on. And you're going to start with what you expect, and then you should release out to your users very quickly, because what you expect them to do is not what they're going to do. How you expect them to speak with you is not how they're going to do that. And then annotation allows you to take those training phrases and select pieces of that and identify those with the entities. And then you can take those and put them into parameters and or define additional parameters. And the example that I'm going to show you today was developed for this talk and takes a little bit about Google Cloud products and some of the certifications that Google Cloud offers. Responses are the messages. When you define them within Dialogflow, these are the responses to the user's active intent that you're going to deliver. So in the example under default messages, you see that we're referring to the product name. And these default messages are used, not going to do anything fulfillment programmatic wise, not look up or personalize values. You can, within fulfillment, you can customize those messages, use it for slot filling, and drive the conversation via context. When you define entities and parameters, you can put those parameters into the responses and control a little bit of the logic like that. Dialogflow will only present the responses where the parameter values are not empty. You can have multiple variations of responses within Dialogflow so that you're not always getting the user, if they hit the same intent regularly, they're not always necessarily getting the same response. On the right-hand side, you can see we've got a variety of responses of hello. And we could have a parameter that is the name. So oftentimes users may start a conversation with, hi, I'm Daniel, or hi, my name is. And you can take that name and you can greet them by name by defining the parameters. Context is, I think of context kind of twofold. It is the input-output of the conversation, and it's what allows us to drive and orchestrate the conversation. When context is set, you can give a much more contextually aware response. And you can have common training phrases amongst a variety of intents, but using context, you can make sure that you're hitting the right one. And context has a defined lifetime, and Dialogflow defaults that to 5. Managing that context so that you're not confusing the conversation later is important. You might want, if you've got a yes/no question or a multitude of yes/no questions, you want to reset your context after each one so that the yes or the no goes to the right tree within that conversation. And this is just going to give you an example. So when I started this, I created an intent about the professional cloud architect credential. So Google Cloud offers I don't know, at least 4, 5, 6 different certifications or credentials. But what if they ask about what is a cloud architect, and then we give them some response and they say, how much does it cost? Well, it isn't necessarily defined unless you have context defined. And you'll see that I have defined context of PCA credential with a lifespan of 5, leaving it at the default. Then I created a new intent for cost of the PCA credential, and it takes as input. That means in addition to the training phrase match, a high level of salience there, we also need this context. From that context, we're going to set a parameter to let us know what the cert in question was, and we can use that for storage and logging and for later analysis. So we're going to jump into a demo. This is the bot that I've created. You'll notice that I've only got 7 intents here. And these 7 intents are going to give us information about the bot, and they're driven by just a handful of entities. So for example, I took just a few of the products that are available within GCP and added these in there. Using that, I created the About GCP products, used the product entity, and as we add training phrases, Dialogflow will do a form of auto annotation If you notice there, because I had defined the entity up front, Dialogflow already recognizes that GCE relates to a defined product within there. I have set this parameter, and this is the default message that I'm going to provide. But if we look here, I have fulfillment enabled so that I can then look at the product, and I've created a trivial webhook that will allow you to see what a webhook fulfillment could look like. But we'll just try it out over here. And let's see, can you tell me about GCE? And we see the response over here that it is a secure and customizable compute surface. But what if I refer to it by compute engine? We get the same response. That's all I've defined. That response is coming from fulfillment over here. And I'm going to switch screens to Visual Studio so you can see it a little bit better. I've defined an array of the products within here. I make sure that the product is within, and then you can see just a simple case statement that lets us know what response we're going to return. This is a trivial example. You can call other services. For example, in one of our products, we are calling another data service that allows us to pull information from a database because we have to worry about legal approved content. This database already has that legal approved content, and we can surface it there. Switching back over here, going into the integrations, we'll take a look. Dialogflow has a lot of integrations available out of the box. The version that we're dealing with right now is Dialogflow Essentials, which is a little bit more user-friendly than the premium version of CX, which really follows conversational stories, and everything is around there. They've divorced intents and training data from the responses. And it's definitely for more complex integrations, such as integrations with your voice telephoning system. But we're going to scroll down here. We can play around with our bot using the Dialogflow Messenger. And you'll notice it pops up over here. And we'll say, tell me about the PCA. How much does it cost? Because we set that context up, it knows specifically what product I'm talking about. And you can see it kind of reconfirm that with Professional Cloud Architect. I also incorporated the About page. Dialogflow also supports FAQs. And FAQs can be supported in the form of question and answer generation and just general knowledge. If we look at this, you can see I put in the path to that it is a FAQ type. We've given it the text HTML MIME type, but I can then, using that, I've only defined 7 intents, but we can ask questions outside of that are more FAQ related. And I encourage you to use the FAQs that you have defined and use intents and entities for the conversations that you want to drive, the conversational experience that you want to have. So let's, we did PCA. Okay, we're going to try, can I take the exam with friends? If you notice, it's telling us that this is coming from the GCP FAQ, and it pulled this response. This is not defined anywhere in the intents that we have. It's pulling that response from. And if we come over here and look at the FAQ, this is the question that was present on the FAQ, but the way that I asked about that can I take it with friends? So you're able to extrapolate using the natural language model that Dialogflow generates. And admittedly, the Dialogflow language model is a little bit of a black box, but you can get some insight into the scoring as you look at the diagnostic info that is available. One of the key areas that we should look at is the salience, intent detection confidence. So in this case, it is 100% confident that it has what I was asking for. Let's go to if we look at our intent detect confidence, what did we come up with this time? Now we've come up with a 64% intent detection confidence. And this can help you zero in on your training a little bit. I'm going to pause for breath and or questions, Jeff.
Sounds good. I've posted a couple questions over in the Q&A, but I'd love to hear from attendees first. So if anyone has a question, please unmute and throw a question over.
Jeff, how much do we use the buttons, images, and advanced features in the chat? So ironically, Dialogflow does not provide out-of-the-box support for rich responses on the web chat interface. Those are reserved more for the Google Assistant integrations, Facebook integrations, Slack, and so forth. However, at SEI, we have implemented a custom library or a custom client that allows us to render those rich responses in web, and we use them very frequently.
Because I actually have been using them on the web using the Dialogflow Messenger integration.
That is interesting.
A newish sort of a thing.
Yeah, I will definitely have to check that out. If we come in here real quick and just look at add response.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're under default, you only have custom text or custom, but I wonder if they've added a new.
If you do the add responses and you do the custom payload.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've implemented a custom payload. Okay.
Exactly. And it's,
yep.
It's just like a JSON sort of a.
Yep. That's exactly what we've done with the custom payload and defining graphical responses within. And you can see a little bit of that here. So are we interested in learning more? And then we get a handful of link out suggestions.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I was able to do in the more advanced of the built-ins, right? The Messenger beta one.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, but we integrated Dialogflow with Slack, and it seemed like the dev cycle to do the forms and button interactions in Slack was, and somewhat isolated from the Dialogflow because, we do the intent and then we'd have to go over to our function app and then render out the renderings for Slack to get the buttons and receive the messages and then wire them back in. So.
Yeah, we had something very similar. In fact, we put something in between our app and Dialogflow so that we could do that control rendering. And one of the biggest gaps that I found is not having some form of, in the responses, some form of iterable. We deal with, classes, for example, where we often want to display multiple classes. But
oh, sure.
Easy way to do that. So, yeah, we've had to implement a custom client library that would allow for that. And then, Gerard, to answer your question, there are external products that integrate with Dialogflow to give you an understanding of the visual tree. Becky, who was with us today as an attendee, creates Visio diagrams to help us understand that, and it can get very complex. And I'm not sure who Providence Holdings is. I think you were just speaking.
Yeah, that's
but
me. That's Joe. Sorry.
no worries, Joe. Nice to chat with you again.
Yeah.
We have a portfolio, so we have multiple bots.
Okay.
Dialogflow ES in particular has a 2,000 intent limit, and when you think about a lack of kind of default yes/no, well, if you've got a lot of yes/no prompts and you're creating follow-up intents or contextual intents, you get intent inflation and you get out of it. But Dialogflow solved for that because they have the idea of mega agent, where you can use one agent to kind of orchestrate them all.
Okay.
But it can be very cumbersome to do that.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You got it.